Welcome to the 2021 TEDxDesignTechHS event live from Crossroads in San Mateo, California. We are humbled you are with us today and thrilled to be putting on the event. My name is Savannah Flock. I'm the Vice President of this phenomenal TEDx event, and I'll be your host for tonight's show. Everything you see here is the culmination of 2 years of planning and preparations stemming from our 2020 event, which was canceled due to COVID-19. However, the wait is over and we could not be more excited to finally get the show started. TED and our school, DesignTech High School, share the same mission: to make the world a better place. D.tech has taught us that students can be the ones to make it happen. As a student-run, student-led TED event, we embody the mission of our school and hope that tonight's event makes the world a little better through all of you. TED is a platform for ideas worth spreading, and tonight you'll hear ideas from all ages. Our mission is to bring communities together to spend a night celebrating the people around us who are changing the world. We will highlight speakers' passions and skills to portray powerful messages and lessons. Our theme this year is Deep Dive. Deep Dive is all about embracing the change that makes us who we are. We are diving deep into the stories that surround us, giving them a stage to shine on. We hope you leave this event inspired to start making a difference in the world in big and small ways, because both matter. We have 9 amazing speakers here tonight from across the world. They each have their own unique message that needs to be heard. This is their time. So let's get on with the show. We have 2 intermissions throughout our 3-hour event with 3 speakers before and after each break. So sit back, relax, and get excited. Preparing dancers for the center stage of life, mental health advocate Jadelle Lee is a professional dance educator, touring adjudicator, published author, and speaker who brings a fresh perspective of life to audiences across the country. Jadelle Lee holds a Bachelor of Arts degree in dance with an emphasis in experiential and unconventional choreography from the University of California, Riverside. Please welcome Jadelle.
Hello everyone, my name is Jadelle Lee, and I'm gonna be honest, I was lost. At 19, in my second year of college, I tried to find myself in someone else. And this wasn't the first time, but I tried to find myself in a woman. I moved in with her, I enjoyed every moment with her, and yet I was still lost. And then one day she decides that it's not working for her anymore. Or better yet, I wasn't working for her anymore, and she actually kicked me out. Now, I'm not gonna lie, I did feel some type of way. I was definitely in my feelings. I didn't think about the severity of the situation. I didn't even think about what was going to come next. I was just so proud in that moment. I just wanted to leave. So I went to go sleep at the Taj. No, actually, I went to go sleep at the park because I didn't have anywhere else to go. Again, I was trying to find myself in someone else, and I found myself sleeping in a park, sharing a can of beans with a homeless gentleman. And I could have never have imagined my being homeless at 19, my being homeless in college. And it was in that moment that I realized you can't find yourself in someone else. Now, this didn't hit me until it got dark. My phone was about to die and it started to get a little cold. And as a person, this was the first time I could see myself in retrospect as an adult. I couldn't blame anyone. I couldn't even feel sorry for myself. I just had to keep going. And that was hard. So the next day I went to class. I didn't know where to leave my things, so I left them with a friend, and unable to do laundry, you could literally smell my socks through my shoes. And then I was so broke that I would ask my friends for some of their lunch. Now, all of this while pursuing my education. And make no mistake, I wanted to finish. I was determined to finish because I believed that if I finished, that all of this would be over, that the struggle wouldn't be so real. So I did. I graduated. I got that degree. I walked that stage and I felt good. And then I started couch surfing. Again, thinking that if I finished, that all of this would be over. I still ended up on someone else's couch. And again, I just wanted to be over. I wanted it to be done. And I believed that something would come of it. So I just kept pursuing my dream. And at the time, I thought my only dream was dancing. So I became a professional. I got signed to a professional talent agency. I got to meet and work with some incredible people, and it was awesome. The challenge was I was always broke. I could never settle or get settled anywhere, and I always felt like I was coming and going. And even though I was getting what I thought I wanted at the time, it was never enough. Now, during this time, I decided to leave LA and give myself roughly 5 years to figure out what area of dance to focus on, couch surfing and all. And because I had nothing to lose, I went for it all. I became a professional dance educator, a professor. I became a touring adjudicator, a published author, even an entrepreneur. And now, a public speaker. And after all of this, it finally hit me. It's all just as important. My being caught up in relationships, my being homeless, my not trying to give up, all helped me to discover the importance of developing an authentically balanced lifestyle. I learned an authentically balanced lifestyle was important. It's important because it helps you understand, it helps you see that things will come in part. Mental, emotional, spiritual, even physical. It's learning how to balance all of who you are. It's discovering all the things that make you, you, and understanding that everything is just as important. For example, your emotional health is just as important as your career goals. Your career goals are just as important as your spiritual health, even your mental health. Now, the key is learning how to balance it all out so that you become your most authentic self. Even your physical health, it's just as important. And I've learned the challenge is discovering what's important to you. Now, for me, what was important was making a lasting impact. I love helping people grow and develop. I love seeing people become versions of themselves that they can be proud of, that they can be excited about, that they can look forward to. To someone else, it might be going out, getting a good grade, going out and becoming that high-powered success that they always envisioned for themselves, or simply preparing and supporting their family. But I've learned that even in all of that, everything matters. You cannot neglect your mental or your emotional or even your spiritual health as you aspire to reach your goals. Now, I can say this because even in my wanting to see myself complete, I had to learn I could not neglect seeing myself in any other area, that I had to include my mind, my body, even my soul. Again, I had to balance it out. Why? Because you're always continuing to grow. You're always evolving. So even in my making a lasting impact, I had to learn how to get out of my own way, how to raise my self-confidence, and how to start believing in myself, which is in fact a part of self-care. I mean, even now, I'm in a season of preparation, which I've learned preparation affects every other dimension of yourself. If you want to be successful, you have to prepare. If you want to go out and get good grades, get a degree, you have to prepare. I mean, if you want a hearty lunch at the end of the day, you have to prepare. And what I'm learning is, even as I'm becoming an authentic version of myself, those dimensions are always going to expand. And in that, God is always going to introduce something new. There are 3 steps to developing an authentically balanced lifestyle. Step 1, recognize what is important to you. In recognizing what's important to you, this simply means identifying or even discovering what you desire to see for your life, what you desire to see for yourself, and striving to be bold in pursuing your goals. Now, over time, I've learned pursuing your goals, it requires confidence. It requires courage. That even in that, you'll discover areas of lack. You'll discover growth opportunities. Now, I'm going to implore you, I'm going to encourage you, pursue those opportunities. In those opportunities, you become your most authentic self. Which leads us to step 2, recognize that you cannot neglect one area of growth for the other. In recognizing you can't neglect one area of growth for the other, you understand that things will come in part. That each season of your life will reveal something new within you. It will reveal something new about you, and in that, you'll discover just how dynamic you are, just how resilient you are, how creative, how amazing you are, that you're in fact not a one-size-fits-all. And in that, this means believing that you're enough. And then finally, we get to step 3. Recognize it all as important. And recognizing it all as important, everything, and I mean everything that you experience, whether it's good, whether it's bad, not only is important to your future success, but it contributes to who you are today. So I encourage you, I implore you to learn to value all of your experiences. Because in doing so, you become a better you begin to see all of your aspects as valuable, and you become the greatest version of yourself. So, recognizing what is important to you, recognizing you cannot neglect one area of growth for the other, and recognizing it all is important, all while embracing your story, are the 3 steps to developing an authentically balanced lifestyle. Thank you.
Lauren Wu is a junior at Design Tech High School. In her free time, she enjoys playing volleyball, basketball, and softball, running the D.tech Philanthropy Club, and is currently planning and designing a mural in Pacifica, California that aims to protect the native environment. As a junior, she's been spending a lot of time thinking and talking with friends about college, and will be sharing her take on how we need to change the narrative the media pushes on young kids about college admissions. Please join me in welcoming Lauren.
When I was in 6th grade, I wrote down all of my goals on Post-it notes and stuck them to my bedside table so I could remind myself as I was going to bed and waking up every morning of what I was pushing myself to achieve and the type of person I wanted to be. I wrote, try out for the school musical, make friends with a person in each of the friend groups at school, and get into Stanford to play both softball and soccer. Slightly more aggressive than the other goals. Now, as a junior in high school and someone that's put a lot of thought into the college admissions process, I began to wonder where this idea came from in the first place. It wasn't from my parents. I knew they'd be proud of me no matter where I ended up, as long as I was working hard. And it certainly wasn't my 6th grade teachers telling me that if I didn't memorize the state capitals, I would never get into Stanford and become successful. And I was no outlier. Recently, I was speaking with one of my friends, and she was reading me the letter she wrote in 5th grade to her future self. She had written, never give up on your dream of going to Stanford or Harvard. She wrote that in 5th grade. So where were we, as kids that had years before we had to start thinking about college, getting the idea that we had to go to schools that accept less than 5% of their applicants? Where were we even hearing about these schools in the first place? Let's start with her. For those of you that have never seen the Disney Channel original movie High School Musical, this is Gabriela Montez, a model student and member of the academic decathlon team who loves to sing and committed to Stanford University. Teddy Duncan from the show Good Luck Charlie committed to Yale. Hannah Montana, aka Miley Stewart, and her best friend Lily committed to Stanford. Bailey from Sweet Life on Deck to Yale. And Allie from Austin and Allie was rejected from Harvard. Surprising. But after scoring a do-over interview, she was accepted. How many people do you know that got to have a do-over interview? Now, I'm not going to say that all of these acceptances were completely outrageous, but think about the seed that's being planted in young kids' minds. The smart characters go to Stanford, Harvard, and Yale. Not even the other Ivy League schools. When Cody from Sweet Life on Deck was rejected from Yale and being comforted by his mother, she said, there's always Princeton, and he responded, and I quote, the armpit of the Ivy League. And when she suggested Brown, he called it a glorified junior college in an ugly color. And it's a similar story for shows like Gilmore Girls. Rory Gilmore was accepted to Harvard, Yale, and Princeton, after her only main achievements being her GPA, her position on the school newspaper, and the fact that she was vice president of her class. Same goes for shows like Glee, Gossip Girl, and the Netflix original shows and movies that reach the newer wave of impressionable kids and teens. Given that so many of the smart characters go on to these elite and uber-competitive colleges, it's no surprise that so many young kids would aspire to do the same. Generally, these characters are the logical, responsible ones, the voices of reason for many of the shows they're on. So many watchers, including sixth grade me, looked up to them as role models. But adopting this mentality at such a young age can be very dangerous. There are almost 27,000 high schools in the US, meaning there are almost 27,000 valedictorians. However, in the past year, Harvard accepted under 2,000 applicants into the class of 2025. In 2016, Stanford only accepted 8% of their applicants that scored an 800 or perfect score on the math section of the SAT. It's not enough to have perfect grades or perfect test scores. Students that seem like they're shoo-ins to everyone that knows them are getting rejected at unbearably high rates. It's easy to fall into the mindset of thinking, if I just had blank, then I'd be happy. However, for many people, this would be a boatload of cash, the perfect body, or an acceptance letter from blank university. Putting all of your self-worth on a singular item or achievement is toxic and leaves you feeling empty and disappointed if you can't have it. In a time when many people are tailoring the way they spend their time to appeal to the college admissions boards at certain colleges, it can also feel like the entirety of how you spent your high school years was a complete waste. This attitude is dangerous even for the tiny percentage of applicants that are accepted into these top schools and are watching their lifelong dreams come to fruition. The "if I just had blank, then I'd be happy" attitude is simply untrue because of a process called hedonic adaptation. Hedonic adaptation, as was explained to me from the Yale online Coursera course, The Science of Well-Being, is the process of becoming accustomed to both positive and negative things, so their emotional effects dissipate over time. This feature of the mind can be very helpful in scenarios like a painful breakup or the loss of a family member, because although you originally think, my life is over and there's no way I'm going to recover from this pain, your brain eventually adapts to it and you're able to carry on. However, in the scenario of being accepted into college, students do not feel the same initial exuberance and joy that they felt upon opening their acceptance letter when they're waking up their junior year to head to their midterms. Eventually, the college you go to simply becomes the college you go to. And this doesn't have to be a bad thing, as long as you still love your school and the environment it fosters. However, if you committed simply based off of how proud you were to say the name and wear the sweatshirt, this can be very problematic. The mentality of striving for awesome things or impressive accomplishments and basing your happiness around that is not only toxic in the context of college admissions, but also in every aspect of your life. In a study done in 2003 by Nickerson and colleagues, they surveyed college freshmen on their materialist attitudes. For example, how much do you want this really awesome car? Or how much do you want this really cool stuff? 20 years later, they found that those that had materialist attitudes reported having much lower life satisfaction and more diagnosed mental health disorders, no matter how financially successful they were or weren't. When the effects of getting something new and exciting wear off, you're left with a void that many people attempt to fill by acquiring more and more cool and exciting stuff. However, none of this is going to lead to long-term happiness because of hedonic adaptation. So, what lifestyle does lead to more fulfillment and happiness? Reverse the mindset of waiting for happiness to come as a result of certain possessions and achievements, and think about the things that you do that genuinely bring you happiness, or the core values and principles that leave you feeling fulfilled. And base your life and the way you spend your time around that. Circling back to college admissions, this would mean that rather than molding who you are and the way you spend your time to appeal to certain college admissions boards, spending the time pursuing passions that feel meaningful to you, and choosing your college and looking for colleges based on which schools align best with your interests and your priorities. This idea is not groundbreaking or new in any way, and I guarantee you that anyone that has just gone through the college app process or is about to go through it has heard it many times before. At our school, they often say that choosing a college is not about winning a game. It's about making a match. And this idea should theoretically make sense to anyone that hears it. However, I was just recently speaking with one of my friends on the schools she's thinking of applying to. And she said, oh yeah, I would never apply to Harvard. It's way too small, it's too far from home, and it seems like the environment there would be way too competitive for me to be happy. But if I got in, I would still go, since it's Harvard. It's not enough to understand and agree with an idea to be able to change the way you live. It is essential that you put it into practice and retrain yourself to actually live based on what makes you happy. However, most of the high schoolers that I know aren't going to abandon the I'm going to work harder than everyone else and get into the top college mentality and suddenly decide that it doesn't matter how prestigious the school I go to is, as long as I can find happiness there. Because it's so hard to get people to reject the idea that's been ingrained in them since they were kids, we need to be changing the narrative from a much earlier age. Disney Channel needs to feature students that are going to community college because they weren't ready to move away from home yet, not because they weren't smart enough to get in anywhere else. Or students that have a very specific astronomy program or music program at some lesser-known college that they're really excited about going to. For every kid that wants to go to college, there are schools out there that they will thrive at. And it's doing them a great injustice for the shows that they watch to preach that there is such a narrow path for smart, high-achieving students. By helping them understand that they should be looking for their own unique path based on what's meaningful and fulfilling to them personally, it would not only help to alleviate some of the stress surrounding an ever more competitive college admissions process, but it would also help them build a life that will lead them to more long-term happiness. Thank you.
Please put your hands together for our next speaker of the night. Lena Kalodios is a San Francisco native, coffee aficionado, semi-professional photographer, and a first-year psychology student at Sarah Lawrence College in the greater New York City area. They are passionate about mental health reform, public transit equality, and having authentic conversations with open individuals. Lena also dabbles in web design and is an avid runner. For their internet presence, visit lenakalodios.com. Please join me in welcoming Lena.
This month, May, is Mental Health Awareness Month. Now, May is also home to a list of other national observances, like Military Appreciation Month, Asian American and Pacific Islander Heritage Month, even National Asparagus Month, and so on. It's not just May either. Every year, week, even day of the year seems to have its own list of national awarenesses and appreciations. But most important to my story is this month's National Mental Health Awareness Month. 2 years, 7 months, and 30 days ago, I was put into a psychiatric hold for the first time in my life. I was a junior in high school at the time. Little did I know that after this time would follow a diagnosis of depression, anxiety, complex PTSD, and an eating disorder, as well as 3 suicide attempts, 2 more inpatient hospitalizations, 2 partial hospital programs, and 1 intensive outpatient program. This, in time, roughly accounts to about 1,200 hours of recovery, or in other words, 171 consecutive days of school missed. For reference, there is about 180 school days in an academic year. So, in short, I spent a lot of time and energy putting up a fight against my own mind. But if ever asked, or even if I ever could, I would not go back and change a single thing about my story, despite its ups and downs. Hopefully, by the end of this, you'll better understand exactly why that's my case, and why I hold my story, my narrative, very near and dear to my heart. So, Mental Health Awareness Month. Sounds like a great thing, right? In theory, yes. Who doesn't love a good awareness campaign? Besides, mental health care has never been more important than now during the COVID-19 pandemic. But even before all of this, the prevalence of mental illness was already on the rise. Mental Health America's data sets from 2018, 2019, and 2020 all show an increase in not only adult and adolescent depression, but as well as suicidal ideation. So thus, an awareness campaign, right? But in practice, this campaign falls short of long-standing, prominent change. For starters, what happens when the month of May comes to a close and June, July, August, and so on follow? Mental health and illness don't just disappear along with it. Nor is this month of May just for companies to slap on slogans like mental health matters or stamp away the stigma onto their merchandise and profit off of in our inherently capitalistic society. And it is certainly not just about awareness either. Don't get me wrong, I think awareness is a fantastic first place to start. But that awareness does not always guarantee action, or that the individual even knows how to successfully and effectively take action in the first place. We need a more tangible bridge between that awareness and action. Thus, I give you the 3 A's of change: acceptance, awareness, acceptance, and action. So, we'll start with what we already know: awareness, identifying the problem at hand. I see you, I hear you, and I may not accept you just quite yet. That's awareness. the enemy of denial. Now, the tricky thing about awareness is that it exists not only in its individual nature, but in much larger contexts as well. Specifically, there are many different factors that can contribute to an individual's mental health, such as societal, biological, ecological, environmental, historical, and even political attributes. This is known as the eco-social model of health. With this integration applied to mental health awareness, I can start to become more aware of how mental health is not just an absence of illness. Or maybe I am making myself more aware with the different political bills at a local and federal level that pertain to crisis intervention and mental health policy. Whatever it is, any awareness is good awareness and a fantastic place to start. So once we have that awareness, once I can see the issue in its full form, then only can I move on to acceptance. Acceptance is a dynamic learning curve of honesty, vulnerability, and persistence. It's certainly not easy, and nor is it linear. In fact, most rewarding things in life aren't at all. But the cool thing about acceptance is that I don't completely have to understand the issue in order to accept it. I don't even have to like it in the first place. I just have to have the willingness to endure it. For example, I myself am not a physicist. I don't completely understand the ins and outs of gravity. Yet, I coexist with it. I would love to be able to jump 10 feet in the air or float, but I simply can't do that because I exist in the same space as gravity. This is the epitome of change. That is acceptance. You need acceptance in order to lose that one thing and gain the other thing of change. That's the process of change. So in the context of mental health, this might look like I accept a particular diagnosis that I'm given, yet that diagnosis does not define me or who I am. Or maybe I have to accept that I will have to give up some of my free time in order to get the recovery and treatment that I need. In the end, acceptance is a balance, is a non-judgmental balance of what I can and cannot control within my internal and external environment. So once we have that acceptance, we can move on to the final step, action. As daunting as its name and stature may seem, I have found this process of action to be rather easier than the first two. And that's because if you break it down, action is just a culmination of that awareness and acceptance. Put the two together, and you get action. In high school, my track coach used to say to me before a race, "Lena, you've done all the hard work. You've showed up to practice. You've gotten comfortable with the uncomfortable. Now, all you have to do is put it together. All you got to do is run fast." And he was right. He was really, really right. I didn't realize that in the grand scheme of things, but it's true. I have done the learning and the accepting and the understanding to the extent that I can. Now I just have to put it all into action. Another thing about action is that it exists with change. The two go hand in hand together. So as I take steps along my path of action, I gain change in time. Change doesn't just happen overnight, nor does it happen within one action here or one action there. Change is a process. And if I can accept that fact, accept that it will happen in time, then comes the action. So now we have our recipe for change: awareness, acceptance, and action. But so what? What's all this talk of change? Why does it matter? Well, for one, that's why I'm here. I am only here because I changed. Otherwise, in the long run, I most likely would have succumbed to suicide. That's why I metaphorically stand before you all today, to move beyond this movement of mere awareness and to create as much potential for change as I can. I want to work to see a generation of people that aren't afraid to have hard conversations, where we don't automatically fear what we don't understand. A society in which suicide is not just a dirty word or a joke. In the larger scheme of things, one where schools focus their funding more on student support rather than hiring armed police officers that they nicely call school resource officers. And on the government side of things, one where mental health care is a real priority that's reflected in our country's political agenda. And more personally to me, one where my scars are not something to gawk at or stare at, but where they are symbols of strength and remembrance. But that's a lot to ask for, both in terms of myself and you all right now. That's not going to all happen tomorrow, but we can certainly begin today, and that begins within the individual. My change, my transformation started within myself. I certainly did not want to acknowledge the fact that I needed help. I did not want to accept that my mental health was a sinking ship. I was so afraid of being a burden, and I was all too caught in this common narrative of how asking for help is seen as weak, that it would lead me to suicide before I ever got help. And even after that point, it still took me years to learn that I don't have to like change in order to change. I just have to accept it. And so, with that fact in mind, I stand here today being extremely proud of my own story. My past has made me the person that I am today. I believe that humans are a sum of all their past experiences, both the good, the bad, and everything in between. I will always have my scars, yet that doesn't mean that they have to define me or my future. In fact, I am proud of my scars. They're my story. They're my own symbols of acceptance. Take a look for yourself. This is a tattoo of an orchid that I have on my left wrist. It doesn't cover up my scars. It rather commemorates them. Commemorates them for where I have been, the work that I've done, and how far I have come, my own journey of change. I am extremely proud of that, and ever so grateful for the people, peer and professional, that have helped me get to the place that I am today. And so, if you take just one thing from my words today, I want it to be a hint of awareness, of acceptance, sorry. You already have that awareness topped off by not only my words, but my fellow speakers as well. And so hold on to that. Those seeds of awareness are to be watered with acceptance, and slowly over time, they will grow into larger action and eventually change. But remember, just because I give my plant more water doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to grow faster. Growth and change take time. They take their own time. And next time you see a campaign for Mental Health Awareness Month on social media, rename it to Mental Health Awareness, Acceptance, and Action Month. Thank you.
John McLean is a world-renowned athlete and Australia's most sought-after corporate speaker. In 1998, John was hit by an 8-ton truck as he rode his bike. It took astonishing courage and determination, but somehow this near-fatal accident was the making of him. His life is a journey in progress, and he continues to set and achieve extraordinary goals as he further improves his mobility. Please join me in welcoming John.
This afternoon, as the sun is setting in Manly Beach, Australia, I'd like to give you some examples of change. I've experienced lots of change in my life, and hopefully some of the lessons that I've learned I can pass on to you to apply in your life in this ever-changing environment. Okay, a little boy, big dreams, wanted to be a professional athlete. Life is pretty good. I'm enjoying my running, I'm enjoying playing football, rugby league in this part of the world, and to fast forward time, I become a professional athlete, getting paid to do what I love. And life was pretty good. I was in a very comfortable space. On the 27th of the 6th in 1988, I got hit by an 8-ton truck. So there's a great example of change. 1 minute I'm running around, loving life, and now I'm fighting for life. So there's my example of change. And therefore, how do you adapt and accept that massive change? It does not just affect you, it affects all that are in and around you. Okay, some lessons. Father, son, I would give you my legs if I could. Brother, it's going to be a marathon opposed to a sprint. Sister, I love you, I'm always going to be there for you. Family doctor, John, don't worry, you will be bigger, you will be faster, and you will be stronger. Left the room. So what did he do? He planted a seed of hope in a broken body, broken mind, trying to come to terms with the fact that A, I'm lucky to be alive, getting hit by a truck, B, I don't have brain damage, and I'm now considered an incomplete paraplegic. Broken my back, damaged my spinal cord. Okay, massive example of change. So some of the things that take place in hospital. Life is not ever going to be what it was. This piece around learning to let go. Very easy to say, very hard to do. This moving on piece. All I really wanted to do was to go back to where I was, to stop the hands of time, put it in reverse and go back. Unfortunately, as we all know, we don't have the luxury of being able to do that. So it took some time. Surely I was depressed, surely I had anxiety, surely my world had collapsed, but I started to build on that with some dreams in time that maybe I could do more with my life. That was my objective, lying in a spinal unit. Fast forward time, 8 weeks out of intensive care, moved into the general ward. 3 things. When I moved into that ward, there were 3 guys who'd broken their necks, couldn't move or feel from their necks down. I come into my bed, into that new environment, and there's another change. And I realized really quickly that I'm so lucky to be alive and have use of my upper body. Putting things into perspective. Okay, let's move through physiotherapy, hydrotherapy, occupational therapy, trying to get you out of this hospitalized situation. What did I dream of? Blue sky, green grass, fresh air, get me out of this hospital. Eventually, after 4 months, I managed to get back home to be with my parents. Okay, another example of change. Coming back home, broken, opposed to when I left a month before my accident, flying. So therefore, this change and transition. Questions. What am I going to do with my life now? Who would be interested in me? All these dark clouds were forming, trying to get a sense of this new reality. Okay, and that's when I started to dream again. I let go of the truck. Literally, it lightened the load. And therefore, what does this new opportunity look like? Remember the doctor, bigger, stronger, faster. So I had to change a lot of things. And I also had to let go of a lot of things. Let go of football, let go of running. Start to embrace new opportunities. So my first mountain to climb was the Hawaiian Ironman. And it'd be nice to stay in this space just for a little bit around from a hospital bed to the Hawaiian Ironman. Arguably the toughest endurance event, one-day event on the planet. What does it consist of? A swim of 3.8 kilometers, 2.4 miles if you're in the US. Then it's a bike ride of 180 kilometers. What is that in the US? That's going to take you to 112 miles. And then it's a 42 kilometer marathon, 26.2 mile marathon. A big day in the office. So I naturally had to change a lot of things in order for me to want to be involved in that particular event. So I had to go to the US, Panama City, to race, to qualify, to line up as the only wheelchair athlete. So naturally, lining up for the Ironman is a big deal. And there are a lot of athletes there to take on that particular course. The heat, the wind, the hills. I wanted to see myself as being equal, and therefore the big challenge ahead was to make sure that I continually changed. Let go of this, embrace this. Quickly go through the swim, 1 hour 7, get onto the hand cycle, arms are screaming, come back home. I missed the bike cutoff by 40 minutes. Asked to continue, finished in 14 hours, 52 minutes. I go back the next year. I do the swim in 1.5. I missed the bike cutoff by 15 minutes due to a flat, finished in 14:39. I go back the next year and finally finish in 12 hours and 21 minutes. How do you go from a hospital bed to the Hawaiian Ironman? Well, you need to make lots of change. And therefore, this whole evolution on continually wanting to improve. So after the Ironman, then there was an opportunity to swim the English Channel. There's a great example of change. They are completely opposite. Change, change, change. Next, having the opportunity to represent at Olympic level, Paralympic level in wheelchair racing. Change, new coach, new environment, new objectives and opportunities. Let's now move forward to having this opportunity to continually dream and envisage what life might look like. What is the best case scenario? Is it possible in time to think that I can get out of the chair? Let me fast forward many years. I finally had the opportunity to take my first steps after 25 years. Lots of change again needed to take place in my internal dialogue. Once I came to terms with the fact that it is possible for me to learn to take some steps, not as they were, a new example of, and I fell over many times, but I kept on getting back up again, to eventually realizing that maybe I can cover 100 meters. It took many attempts. So the next question is, okay, what else is out there in relation to technology, innovation and science? In terms of technology, we now have carbon fiber leg brace technology out of the US military, which I was able to get access to. Next change, do you have the courage to go back to finish what you had started 26 years later? Let's call that the triathlon that I was training for when I had my accident. Well, the answer to that is yes. I think we always have the courage if we see the opportunity. So I go and I line up again. Doing the swim 1 kilometer, I felt quite comfortable. Crawling out, putting on my carbon fiber legs, getting onto a conventional bike again, riding 30 kilometers. Now the big challenge was to see whether I could cover 10 kilometers walking, both with leg braces, both with carbon fiber poles for extra support, and that equals in the US about 6 miles. So you can see from 6 years in a wheelchair to taking on 6 miles is a very big leap. So I realized that if I put one foot in front of the other, that would ultimately allow me to get closer to a finish line. Yes, lots of challenges. Yes, lots of stops. Yes, lots of regrouping, but ultimately to create that picture to cross the finish line with my wife and my son, with a collective group of others. So hopefully that's given you some example of the change. And therefore, what are the steps to change? For me, I'd like to share a graph with you coming up shortly on your screen around the importance of the 5 M's. Having a map or a plan, critical. Engaging the right mindset, equally critical. Accessing a mentor, someone who has more experience than knowledge than you. Access your motivation to change. And finally, your momentum. Measure your progress over time. These 5 steps have allowed me to get out of a hospital bed, take on the Hawaiian Ironman, into the English Channel, and to ultimately go back to finish what I'd started, the Nepean Triathlon. So, I want to share with you more change. I'm stimulated by it. This world is going through a global change. I got hit by a physical truck. We're going through a global pandemic. Change is happening right across the planet. The question is, do you have the courage to continue to take those steps forward? Do you have the courage? Understand that change is a constant. Change is a constant. I encourage you to keep on changing, challenging yourself to the opportunities, and to keep on moving forward. I'd now like to go for a bit of a swim in the water. I appreciate your opportunity and the time. I look forward to catching up soon. Thanks again, guys.
Perfect.
Jeremy Rosman dropped out of MIT to found Y Combinator-backed Make School, a new college in San Francisco teaching digital product development and entrepreneurship. He's mentored hundreds of students, aspiring software engineers and entrepreneurs who have gone on to raise millions in venture capital and land jobs at top tech employers. Please join me in welcoming Jeremy.
So, how can education help address wealth inequality? Well, first, we have to examine the assumptions we make when we think about the problem of wealth inequality. We tend to root our thinking in notions of a fixed world. There's a pie that needs to be divided more equitably amongst our population. And the roots of that thinking are very understandable. For much of human history, wealth was often tied to finite and fixed assets like land. During the course of the Industrial Revolution, we started untethering that connection a little bit as we could pump that goop from the earth that we call oil, burn it, and use it to power machines that could allow us to create products and services like railroads and textiles that really started untethering our ability to create wealth from actual finite assets like land. But the true transformation happened during the digital economy, when all of a sudden a couple of teenagers in a garage with a laptop could launch an application that itself could generate billions of dollars of value. And so as we think about the world, we have to remember that we make a lot of assumptions about the fixed nature of the world, when in fact we are untethered more than ever before from fixed assets. This is reflected in a trend that is quite shocking. Over the past 200 years, on average, the global economy has tended to double every 25 years. That means that the world is roughly twice as rich as it was when I was born. And so the question we should be asking ourselves is really not who has what today, because 90% of the wealth that will exist in our lifetimes has not been created yet. The question that we should be asking is really, who is in line? Who is creating that wealth, and who is receiving that wealth creation? And that's a different way of thinking of things. That's not thinking about the static state of the world, a pie that needs to be divided. It's thinking about, over the course of our lifetimes, as new wealth enters this world, who's creating it and who is receiving it. I want to focus a bit on a section of the world, the one that I'm in right here, the Bay Area, the Silicon Valley, that exemplifies this trend. Our local economy is a $900 billion a year economy, and here in the South Bay, the San Jose metropolitan area, we have a $130,000 a year per capita GDP, which actually places us as a standalone region above the nation of Qatar, the global #1, which relies heavily on oil for its GDP. So officially, the section of the country that relies on the knowledge economy, the tech economy, has actually outpaced in per capita economic output the country that is most wealthy as a result of oil. That tells you a bit about the shift from fixed to somewhat variable as a result of resource extraction, industrial revolution, to now completely digital. In fact, over the last 15 years, the tech sector of the economy globally, not just here, but across the entire globe, has outpaced by 2.5 times the rate of growth of the underlying general economy. So what we're seeing is a rapid transformation of are wealth creation that is driving the future economic output, the future wealth that's going to be created into this world, more and more in the hands of those who are involved in some way, shape, or form in the tech economy. So when we ask the question, not just about who has what today, but who is in line to receive the wealth of tomorrow, the answer increasingly is becoming folks who are involved in tech, folks who are leveraging the digital economy, the knowledge economy, to create goods and services, both real and digital, that are frankly driving a tremendous explosion of wealth in this area alone and driving a lot of global prosperity. So, we talk about growth mindset, hear that term thrown around a lot. Want to apply it here. Growth mindset doesn't mean what you think it means in this context. We need to have a growth mindset not just about ourselves, what we can accomplish, but a growth mindset about the world, and about the world, what the world can accomplish. The world is not fixed and static, and therefore we miss something very important when we just think about redistributing assets or reallocating slices of the pie. The problem also to consider is that we have sidestepped responsibility for addressing this issue in this new digital economy age, because we've thought, oftentimes you'll hear in the press, well, technology is a meritocracy. Technology is not going to be like the economies of before. Here, like I mentioned, a couple teenagers in a garage could go ahead and create billions of dollars of value. So we've solved the problem, haven't we, right? We no longer are beholden to old landowners, and it's no longer about lords and fiefdoms. Today, it's free, it's democratic. But the issue is that we've examined over the last 10 years, and I've seen in my career in technology education, that it simply is the case that the tools of wealth creation, the tools to create things with technology, are unfortunately not landing equitably and distributed equitably amongst our population. One of the reasons for this is higher education. You might be shocked to find out that a small number of schools that are well known to be funnels in the Silicon Valley, we're talking about the Stanfords and the Harvards and the MITs, that are way overrepresented both in who venture capitalists fund as well as who large tech companies hire from. These schools are serving a majority wealthy student population. For example, you might be surprised to find out that Harvard has 2/3 or more of its student population coming from the top 20% of families by income. And at a school like Stanford, right in our backyard, almost 1 in 5 students comes from the top 1% of US families by income. So you see the trend here. We have these institutions that are actually, perhaps to some degree, bucking some of the trends that higher ed is being accused of right now. There's a lot of narrative about the relevance of higher education, the disconnect between traditional education, the jobs that students want. But there are these schools at the very top of these rankings that, whether it's by reputation or whether it's by good curriculum or good connections, they are delivering value to their students. They are funneling their students into high-earning careers. They are equipping them to raise money, to become those next generation of wealth creators, of billionaires through entrepreneurship. But the problem is that those schools are serving a student population that does not, by any stretch of the imagination, represent an equitable and even slice of the US population, let alone the world population. And so we have effectively these gatekeepers that are able to get certain things right in higher ed that many other institutions can't, and yet that are not spreading that wealth and not putting the tools of wealth creation in the hands of many. And then when you look past those schools, you get a mixed bag. Some institutions that are performing much better than the reputation would suggest, some schools that are managing to stay pristine and yet are not delivering good outcomes. But by and large, we have failed as a society to normalize and equitably distribute the skills that folks need to participate, not just as content consumers, but content creators with technology. And so we need to invest in interventions that shift that mindset, that get us to think through the education we go through as early as primary school, that the world around us, that we can make computers work for us, and that we can be one of those people that is in line to untether wealth creation from fixed assets, from land, from owning a mine, from owning an oil well, and actually empower them to look at the world around them and say, okay, what problems can I solve with technology? And to believe in themselves that they could be among those who solve real problems with tech. Because reality is, we all know about the TikToks, the Googles, the Facebooks, the tip of the tech iceberg, the products we use every day. And we sometimes mistake that for what tech is overall, but that is just the tip of the iceberg. Every single industry that we interact with on a day-to-day basis, or that we hope not to interact with on a day-to-day basis, like healthcare, Every single industry, from farming to fashion to sports, is today augmented or disrupted by technology. It is a simple truth. The reason that we are generating $900 billion a year of economic value in the Bay Area is not just because of social apps. It's because of all the apps and services and software you don't see. It's what's powering our supply chains. It's what's powering our farms. It's what's powering our hospitals. It's what's powering governments. And the people who are able to capture the wealth created by all of that are the ones who know how to look at the world, identify real problems that need solving, and figure out how they can make computers work for them to solve those problems. Sometimes we call that building an app. Sometimes we call that building a machine learning model. But whatever it is, that skill set of identifying problems in the world and using technology to solve it is what has generated untold billions of dollars of wealth for new entrants who did not come from a landowning class, who didn't own oil wells, but who were able to get these skills largely because they came from a generation before that gave them the opportunities to get to the right schools, to get to the right mindset that we have, again, failed to distribute equitably. So, how can we do this right? The first thing we need to do is we need to start young. We need to get kids to understand as early as first grade that they can get computers to work for them. That an off-the-shelf machine learning model can be shown 10 photos of someone smiling and 10 photos of someone frowning, and that you can teach a computer to recognize the difference. And then to ask kids how they would feel if we installed microphones in the playground and trained a computer to recognize when, for example, they said something bad about their teacher. How would that make them feel? What are the ethical implications? Is it right? Is it right to get in trouble for saying something bad about a bad teacher? We can get the kids to start thinking of themselves as potential creators. We can get kids to start thinking of themselves as able to leverage technology to build things and solve problems. And we can get kids to start thinking from day one about the core ethical issues that if we don't tackle, we do risk the technologically literate class plunging us into some kind of techno-dystopia. And this is all within reach. It's something that we can do, but we must recognize that it's our responsibility to do so. And number two, we must do it with that outcome in mind and not just to tick a box. What do I mean by that? Imagine that you ended up in a creative writing 101 class. And you were told, we're going to learn how to use the formatting options in our word processor. You spent the entire year learning how to bold text, indent text, italicize text, create 2 columns of text. And then at the end of the year, you were told, great, you learned creative writing. Talk about missing the forest for the trees. Well, the number of schools that I've seen who say, we do programming, we teach kids digital skills, we teach them HTML and CSS. That number is too darn high. It simply is the case that HTML and CSS are the layout language, just like formatting in a word processor is just about layout. It's not about substance, it's not about creativity. And we need to hold ourselves accountable to actually, as educators, being willing to be in an uncomfortable position, to not know machine learning, but to still go out there and figure out how we're going to teach it to young kids, how we're going to teach app development, how we're going to teach web development, procedural thinking, logic, and so on and so forth. All the skills necessary to leverage technology to become a creator and not a consumer. And we can do it. We've seen it happen in districts across the country. We've seen it happen in states like Kentucky that have mandated computer science education and done a lot of work to get their educators up to snuff and able to deliver. But we can't just hide behind ticking the box. Oh yes, we do programming, we do HTML and CSS. That is not good enough. And as the world changes and technology changes fast, we need to be there adapting to those changes and starting at an early age. And once we make it to higher education, we need to build connections to real-world applications. Nobody should feel like they need to look a certain way, be a certain gender, or come from a certain background to be into tech. We need to bust the myth that tech is about sitting in front of a computer 12 hours a day programming. That's not what it's about. Today, wealth is created when you build the right product, the right service. And that involves collaborating with large teams, with designers, with managers, and most of all, having empathy and communication with your end user. These are all skills that pull you away from the computer. You can't be at the computer 12 hours a day because no world-changing piece of technology is built by a single person. It is a social activity, and the world needs to know that. And the world needs to know that it's not about being into building apps or websites for their own sake. It's about being into solving problems in whatever industry or field you care about. You need to know, as a young child, that if your passion is fashion, if your passion is economics, if your passion is veterinary care, that there is a world there's room for you in the world of tech. And there are people with your same passions and your same dreams there using technology, not as consumers, but as creators to make the world a better place. And that those people are in line to capture much of the wealth creation that is coming down the line. And this is not to malign people who choose to not optimize their life path around wealth creation or income. But if we're going to talk about wealth inequality and who has what and who becomes rich, we have to broach this uncomfortable concept and figure out how do we get this in the hands of a more diverse set of people. And part of it involves just making sure that people know there's no one profile. You don't have to look like me to want to go into technology. And finally, we need to bust the fake choice between career skills and general education. It's simply a false dichotomy. It is a myth propagated by higher education institutions that are feeling defensive because they have been operating the same way for decades, optimizing for learning's sake, detached from real-world applications, and now facing the reality that no matter which survey you look at, the majority of undergraduates in the United States are in college to get a job. And there's a mismatch between that intent and what colleges are sometimes prepared to deliver. And so, as a defensive move, we've started to talk about, well, are we doing career skills or general skills? And the answer is, we have to do both. We have to teach students to recognize the rise of fascism and study its history just as much as we have to teach students how to be gainfully employed after they graduate. This is a false choice. Even an associate's program is 2 years of education. Undergraduate programs, on average, take students 4 to 6 years. We have the time to do both. There is no reason that we need to be sacrificing one for the other. And it is just as true that it's unacceptable that a student would graduate from college with a deep philosophical, historical, and ethical understanding of the world, prepared to be an engaged citizen of civic society and be unemployed. That's just as unacceptable as someone who emerges with pure career skills, able to whip up an application at a moment's notice to create whatever they imagine in their mind's eye, and have no sense of history, no sense of context, no sense of ethics. Both are unacceptable, and we have to hold ourselves accountable to both. And students in either bucket, they realize that the other side is missing. They know that they are missing critical skills. They know that the schools that serve them can do better. So, how can education help solve wealth inequality? The first step is to recognize that we are not talking about a fixed pie, that 90% of the wealth that we are trying to redistribute doesn't exist yet, is going to be created by people who are going to be given the skills and put in the positions to look at the world, create the applications and services that generate that wealth, and then benefit from that economically. And education is the tool we have in our tool belt to more equitably redistribute the availability of those skills, and therefore diversify the profiles of people who put themselves in line to be creating and receiving the next generation of wealth. Thank you.
We will now be transitioning to our second intermission of the night. Please hang tight and we'll be back in 5 minutes.
Cuerpo alegría Macarena, que tu cuerpo pa darle alegría y cosa buena.
Welcome back, everyone. Please put your hands together for our next speaker of the night. Ryan Yee is a senior at Design Tech High School and will be attending Northeastern University in the fall. His interviews with many artists, designers, and activists have acted as a way to not only bridge the gap between the creators and their audiences, but to spread awareness of the social injustices that plague America. His talk will inspire you to use your voice, and your platform to create change in your community. Please join me in welcoming Ryan.
What's up, everyone? I hope everyone's having a great night. I'm truly super blessed to be here with all these talented, amazing speakers. I'm Ryan Yee. I'm a senior at D.tech, and I'm personally inspired by people like Muhammad Ali, Colin Kaepernick, people that use their platform to amplify and push across these super powerful, super important messages. And when I was a junior, going into my senior year, I was working with the Diversity Council at my school, and we were trying to figure out how we can push across diversity and social justice to our student body. And that's when I came up with the idea to partner up with the Koi Stream, which was run by Aiden, who's running tonight's show, and Jackson. And we pretty much came up with the idea of how do we use this news network type thing in order to push across the message. And essentially what we did was we came up with the idea of interviewing artists, rappers, anyone that we personally had interest in. And I loved that idea. And I came up with the idea to interview this rapper. His name's Cam Jones, super talented guy out of Pismo Beach. And we ran with the idea, we scheduled it and everything like that. And we kind of got into it and we were like, what is the main message of what we want to have? And for those of you who don't know who Cam is, he's a super talented guy, like I said. And he just has this great energy, great aura around him. And we really wanted to focus on that with our interview. And so instead of talking about music for half an hour, we talked a lot about how his content, how his music, how his songs all kind of tie together and just help make a person's day better, just make more light. And we ran with that idea and we loved it. Everyone else loved it at the school. And we put it on YouTube and everything like that. And then maybe I want to say for the next 3 months, we went crazy hard with these interviews. We were doing multiple a week, pushing out an interview every week for 3-4 months. And every week we would go sit down in the studio and we'd throw ideas at the board. We would say, what do we want our intent to be? What do we want what message do we want to get across? And one super important interview to me personally was an interview with my good friend, Zach Levine. He's a basketball coach from Burlingame, California. He runs a program called NorCal Rush, which is a bunch of middle school kids who get together under him, he's just a high schooler. He started his own business. It's awesome. And instead of talking about basketball, which I thought we were going to do, Zach and I have grown up together. We've watched countless games, played in countless games. I thought we were just going to talk about basketball, but we eventually ended up talking about how he became such a mentor to all these younger kids. And it was just an awesome interview. I learned a lot about how he takes the approach of before winning, he wants to teach these kids how to be better teammates, better classmates, better brothers and sisters, and better adults when they grow up, teaching these valuable life lessons. And so I thought that was real important, and it was just an awesome interview. So from then on, we were just sitting down, focusing, interview, intent, and then planning the interview. And then just a couple months ago, after an incident where a 91-year-old woman was set on fire in Brooklyn, she Cantonese, just like my grandmother. This really hit home for all of us. And there was a rapper named China Mac from Brooklyn who was spearheading this movement called the They Can't Burn Us All movement. It's a movement geared towards Asian American pride, anti-Asian American hate crimes, and raising that awareness. And I saw that he was holding a rally in San Francisco's Chinatown, and I was pumped. I was like, I gotta go, I gotta meet him, gotta try and set up an interview. And so I went, met him. I was super nervous, like shaking out of my body. And I was like, hey, Mr. Mack, can I get an interview? And he was like, and I thought he was gonna be like, no. But he was like, yeah, sure. And so it turned out awesome. We were super pumped. And Jackson, Aiden, and I, along with the rest of the team, we sat in the studio for the next week, I wanna say 8 hours a day, just throwing ideas off of each other. What do we say? What do we do this? What do we do that? And if you had asked me 3-4 years ago, I would have told you that, oh, we gotta talk about the Wu-Tang Clan. He has songs with Method Man. And today, that day, we took the approach of, we gotta talk about anti-Asian hate crimes. And so that was really the message behind our whole interview with him. We talked a lot about what Asians can do for other Asian Americans. For example, there's a group of Asian American teenagers out in San Francisco walking the elderly to go get groceries. And so just simple stuff like that. And that really hit home for me, that whole interview. I took a lot away from it, learning about just taking pride in who I am as an Asian American and just focusing on how I can help my community. And so if I leave you with one message today, it would be that build your platform, connect with the right people, and use your voice most importantly. Thank you.
Dr. Leslie Martin is a passionate advocate for mental health, children's welfare, and education. Her work as the founding director of a teen-led mental health nonprofit called Safe Space, alongside her ongoing support for children's welfare and education, has given her a powerful voice when it comes to the well-being of all. Please join me in welcoming Leslie.
When I was 8 years old, I remember my father, a pediatric surgeon, coming home from the hospital, sharing a story about a young patient so physically abused that she might not live. The next day, my mom and I bought some toys hoping she would heal. After that experience, I knew I wanted to work with kids. Not sure what I would become, but I hope to make a difference for those who struggle. So my story really starts in 1982. It's a time for big hair, puffy clothes, new wave, rap, punk, rock, funk, and preppies. It was also a time when I started my real job, my first job after college as a child life therapist at Children's Hospital of Los Angeles on the hematology oncology ward and the rehab units. And I worked directly with kids who had cancer, stroke, and major orthopedic and connective tissue diseases. It was an incredibly intense job, but I knew in my heart, that I needed to help these kids. Often these children experience incredibly stressful and traumatic events through painful medical procedures that lead to feelings of fear, confusion, loss of control, and have devastating effects on their emotional well-being. As a child life specialist, I help them cope with this trauma through a therapeutic play intervention and psychological preparation for medical procedures. Each child presents a new challenge, a unique challenge that drew on my previous experiences, my knowledge of child development, and my desire to comfort them through an extremely difficult time in their lives. My caseload of patients was huge, but actually several cases truly changed my life forever. One such story was about a 14-year-old boy. Jose was 11 years old when he was diagnosed with a severe blood and connective tissue disease. He was the only child of two caring parents who understandably worried immensely about their medical condition. Over the course of several years, I got to know Jose and his family very well because of their multiple hospital visits and emergencies. Jose hated the hospital because it was associated with pain, loss of control, and desperation. He wondered if he would ever get better. He would often refuse blood draws, hated the tubes and monitors, and really had a hard time with the doctors and nurses and physical therapists who were trying to help him. Jose and I had a deal. Our relationship was built on trust and honesty with a balance of positive experiences, and psychological preparation for his medical procedures. I would talk to him about the intrusive procedures through demonstrating with a stuffed animal on what was to happen, asking how he felt, assessing his understanding, and how to help him get through these events, knowing there was going to be an end in sight. I accompanied Jose to all the procedures and followed up with talking with him afterwards. I knew Jose would not heal from this disease, and it would eventually take his life. But that did not mean he stopped living. Together, we continued to play board games, adventured outside the hospital to the nearby gardens and play areas, and visited hospital staff on other floors. Tuesday nights in the unit was always special, when all the kids could participate. All those kids who could participate cooked their favorite dinners together, like spaghetti and meatballs, mac and cheese, and chocolate chip cookies. Preparing food and eating together brought a sense of community and normalcy to the medical unit. Jose loved this activity, and his family would often bring in his favorite treats from home. The hospital staff, children, and families would all sit together and enjoy the meal that made us feel normal. As Jose's condition worsened, I would spend time by his bed, creating challenging Lego figures, which he absolutely loved. This also provided a respite for his parents. And after a long battle, Jose finally succumbed to the illness peacefully with all of us in the room. At his memorial service, Jose's parents asked that I speak about my relationship with him, which was an unbelievable, incredible honor. At the follow-up reception, they asked that I sit with them as they greeted family and friends. This was truly a pivotal moment for me when I realized I wanted to focus my career supporting children and families. I stayed at the hospital for 4 more years and had similar impactful experiences. I quickly put in place a rule for myself, which I hope all of you will take tonight, is to, in order to avoid job burnout, be in a job for 5 years, then look around, see if it's challenging, and if I'm happy. If so, continue or change to a new direction. Well, I changed a lot. As a result of my career, the path was twisted and turned with many unique jobs, from designing and developing the San Jose Children's Discovery Museum, becoming a teacher, a principal, and starting a teen mental health organization called Safe Space. In retirement, I'm a court-appointed special advocate for kids. And so the journey continues. Commitment and passion for kids continues to enrich my life and the lives of others in so many uncountable ways. Would I do it over again? Absolutely. Thank you.
Frances Wong is a senior at Design Tech High School who will be attending UC Berkeley in the fall. She is highly involved in interdisciplinary studies and entrepreneurship with experience in ventures, healthcare, and startups. Frances is also an avid musician and hopes to one day take on gastronomy. Please join me in welcoming Frances.
Thank you so much. I've just been introduced, but I want to add one little thing. It's that a few months ago, I turned 18. I wholeheartedly believe that it is an accomplishment in and of itself. But the reason why this is important is because in the picture you can see, I'm just 12 years old. Now, this was my first interaction with business and entrepreneurship, and it was at a place called Camp Bismarck. This is basically what it was. 6 to 7 kids would group up, and we would take over the C-level positions in a company. So CEO, CTO, all the executives. It was a very, very attractive camp and very attractive program for all of us. And the idea was that we would study this company, any company, and we would look at their existing technology, their existing products, their mission, and kind of where they want to go with the company. And then we would build a pitch deck, and a business plan around something new using something that they already had. So at the very end of this 2-week boot camp, we would basically go to Microsoft and pitch in front of real life investors. So it was very exciting. However, growing up very shy, it made new things and talking in front of people and meeting new people really, really challenging for me. So this business camp, Camp Bismarck, was not at all my idea of fun, and I'm pretty sure I didn't want to do it. However, it was a place that started a kind of new passion for me, and it allowed me an opportunity to grow, and it is a really big part of who I am today. So knowing all of this, theoretically, I've been at it for 6 years now, this entrepreneurship and this whole mindset thing, which is a little off-putting. But as I've grown, I know that a lot of people and a lot of adults want, for me and my peers to create something more tangible with the mindset and the skill sets that we have. And we get a lot of advice, which is all really helpful, the usual, work hard, persist after your goals, be passionate about the things that you want to achieve. And if you ever fall, get back up and try something else. And I think that it's all really good advice, and it's all something that I had to grow into and to teach myself to, do and actively think about when I do fail. But I think that the most important part for me has been my environment and the resources that I've had access to. So let's talk about environment. What you can see here is an industrial building. Industrial building turns school district building, then a car repair shop. If you look really closely, you can see the car still in the wall. And finally, a high school. Rollins Road and this industrial building was my garage school. It is the first campus that I went to of my high school, and it is the beginning of my fastest growing 4 years and landed me every opportunity and happiness that I have. Now, at the end of the day, I still stand by the fact that environment is very important. And so let's talk about Rollins. Why did I choose Design Tech High School? Full transparency here, I chose Rollins because I would not have to do PE. I would give and do anything to avoid the mile and the pacer, and followed very, very shortly by not having to do homework. Now, in my 4 years, I've obviously grown out of that, and here's what I've discovered. D.tech gives a lot of free time. We have access to Oracle, lots of external and community resources, and really, really great people. Now, in my environment, I've grown to join things, start things, and obviously that's a pretty big character growth from, being shy and not liking to meet new people. And I found that the best resources are my friends. Now I'm gonna switch gears and we're gonna talk about something that is not school, which is a Stanford clinical anatomy program that I went to when I was 16. So we've jumped a couple of years now. I was very, very much dead set on working in medicine, to be a surgeon very specifically. And I was very tunnel vision. It was all that I cared about. And so, my parents and I decided we were going to try it out to see if I was really passionate and if I really cared about all of this stuff. And so I went and, I obviously learned about the human body and all the systems that are in the body. But here's my biggest takeaway from this program. I met like-minded people who are still my friends to this day, and it molded my work ethic. And naturally being around people who are competitive and care about the topic that we're learning about is very helpful. And it built my mindset about passion and really caring about a product or a topic. So that was when I was 16. And soon after, as the school year started again, I started doing internships through the intercession program at my school. And there I met adults, which is very anticlimactic, but it meant a lot to me to interact with people in industries that I had really considered interacting with. And I met adults that were not my parents, were not my family friends, and were not my friends' parents. And what I learned was just career direction and advice, and being around people who had a multitude of life experiences was incredibly helpful. I want to note that one of my favorite internships was with a scholarship program, and another with a college resource program for underprivileged students. And those mentors have become my life mentors and have taught me a lot about what I want to do with my time as I become an adult and as I figure out my own career direction. Finally, I'd like to talk about my school activities that kind of were enabled by my school environment. Activities like Coistream and being on leadership have taught me a lot about, expanding and diversifying my portfolio, which sounds like a lot of buzzwords, but it's really just about learning about my interests and where I want to go from here on out. And come senior year, which is this year, I had a really, really unique opportunity to give back. So my best friend and I, Michael, were able to teach a D-Lab wherein we recreated the kind of environment and the lesson and the learning of Camp BizSmart. And it was essentially a culmination of everything that I had learned throughout the years. And it was an opportunity for me to share the things that I was passionate about and the things that I know that I love with somebody else. So here I am. Here are my key takeaways in my 18 years of life and 6 years of this entrepreneurship thing. This is something I told my students and something I'm trying to live. And it's try everything, literally everything. You'll learn something from each experience, and if what you learned was that you absolutely hated it, that's okay. You tried it, you know that you hate it, and it's time to get up and move on and try something else. Going back to environment and resources, something that I've learned from school, which is a huge constant environment for me was that great growth comes from the environment and the people that you're around. Mine taught me to navigate a bureaucracy and to communicate and to take every opportunity in stride. And it was an opportunity to be in the real world at a really low risk. Growing up in the Bay Area, something that I keep hearing is that 9 out of 10 startups and entrepreneurs fail. And with a statistic like that, you've got to think there's some kind of higher power or something out there that's really stopping you. And it's oftentimes that the thing that's stopping you is right in front of your face and very much not a higher power. I'm very lucky to have learned that in high school at such a young age where the impact of my work is not so high. And that I learned to work harder, to become more independent, and to pursue the thing that I want. Finally, the thing that I would like everyone to take away today is that there's a time to push for your wants and a time to move on to the next thing. And that the most important part of all of this is to move with your environment and to move with your resources. Thank you.
Thank you all for joining us tonight. Thank you to the crew, the student team, and our parent supporters. Tonight would not be possible without the support of our sponsors, Grindstone Software Inc., Hint, and DesignTech High School. To our speakers, Jadelle Lee, Lauren Wu, Azita Nahai, Lena Kalodios, John McLean, Jeremy Rosman, Ryan Yee, Francis Wong, and Leslie Martin. Tonight was a show filled with messages of change and hope. As a team, we hope you leave with the incentive and inspiration to get out there and start sharing your own story. Until next time, good night.